souls, thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Carolyn and this channel is all about true crime, mystery, and anything abnormal. Highly recommend subscribing because this channel is definitely a vibe. And before I even get started on the video, I just want to apologize. The audio probably does not sound great. I have pneumonia right now. I am recovering, but I still have pneumonia, so my voice probably sounds not great. So if this is your first time ever seeing one of my videos, it doesn't usually sound like this, and please bear with me. I really wanted to get a video out this week, so I'm doing it with pneumonia. Yay! Today's story is a very interesting one. So let's get right into today's story. In June, a woman by the name of Brenda Delgado received a devastating email. The email was from her ex-boyfriend, Dr. Ricardo. Brenda was 31 years old and she was attending Stanford Brown College for a dental hygiene program. Ricky, her ex, who she had received the email from, he was a graduate of the prestigious Stanford Medical School. He had come to Dallas in 2011 to complete his residency in dermatology at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. It was now 2015, and he was working as an assistant professor at the university. Ricky was an absolutely amazing doctor, and he had an amazing bedside manner. All of his patients appreciated all the work that he had done and how kind and sweet he was towards the patients. Ricky and Brenda had met in August 2012, and to say their relationship moved fast, it moved fast. Within 3 months of dating, Brenda had moved into Ricky's apartment. They did have one brief breakup, but overall they had spent 2.5 years extremely close and in a really happy relationship. Ricky had even bought a promise ring for Brenda with the intention, obviously, that one day they would get married. But Ricky started doubting if Brenda was really the right person for him. And he started to kind of take a step back and look at the relationship and see if this was really the relationship that he wanted to be in and the relationship he wanted to be in for the rest of his life. In February 2015, Ricky told Brenda that he really wanted to move on and end their relationship. He was no longer happy, and it wasn't, a very contentious breakup. It wasn't, Ricky and her having huge fights and this really dramatic breakup. He just simply told her that he didn't think that they were right together and that he wanted to stop dating her. So the email that I had mentioned at the beginning of the video, that was Ricky's email to Brenda telling her that he wanted to stay separated. He had found a new girlfriend. He was very happy with her and wanted to move on in that direction. Now, Brenda did not take this well at all. Ricky's new girlfriend's name was Kendra Hatcher. She was a 35-year-old pediatric dentist who lived in Gable Park 17, which was a luxury high-rise apartment building in Dallas's Uptown. Kendra was an absolutely beautiful woman, and she was head over heels with Ricky. And on one of their first dates, she wore a sweatshirt that said, "I'm with Dreamy." Throughout that summer, Ricky and Kendra, they had an absolutely wonderful time. They were going on very nice vacations, and a lot of the information about their relationship they were putting on Facebook, and they were putting on a lot of cute pictures, and they were really advertising kind of their relationship on their Facebook. And to them, they were just sharing their bliss with all of their friends and family. They had no idea that somebody with sinister intentions was watching that Facebook page. And things would take a dramatic turn when the two mentioned that they were going to start a wedding fund. The two were planning to get married. On September 2nd, the day before Kendra was to fly with Ricky to Cancun on a weekend vacation that they were going on, someone walked up to her in her parking garage at Gable Park 17 and shot a bullet into her head. And she was killed instantly. To say it caused shock and horror to the community was an understatement. Kendra was such a loving, wonderful woman, and no one could imagine who on earth would want to hurt her. She treated everyone with love and respect. She didn't have any enemies, and she really just was the kind of person that everyone seemed to really like. The initial investigation suggested that possibly it could be from a robbery because Kendra had a tan Coach purse that had been stolen when she had been killed. So initially police thought possibly this was a robbery, and the fact that she lived in this very luxurious apartment complex led them to think that this was a target to rob Kendra. But that theory did not last long, and the truth behind why she had been killed was absolutely unbelievable. After more investigating, detectives then believed that Kendra had been killed at a murder for hire scheme that had been orchestrated by none other than Ricky's ex-girlfriend, Brenda Delgado. Ricky had assumed that when him and Brenda had moved on, Brenda had, gone on about her life, and he hadn't really thought much about her. And the interesting thing was, a lot of places he would go, Brenda would just happen to be there. And he just kept thinking, maybe it's coincidences, maybe I'm at the grocery store, she happens to come to the grocery store I'm at. Like, he kept running into her, and he was just assuming that it was all just, by chance. None of it was by chance. Brenda was stalking him. Brenda had not only been stalking him in person, she had also been stalking him online. She had access to his cell phone and his location. She had access to his Facebook, and she could go on his phone and read all of his texts, anything he said to anyone on Facebook. Like, she had access to all of his information. She was an absolutely obsessed, jealous, crazy person. Like, she was obsessed with Ricky. And to her, if she couldn't have him, no one could. The other thing was, her mother, while they had been dating, Ricky had hired her mother to come and clean his apartment. So when they broke up, he continued having the mother clean the apartment, and he paid her to do this. So not only did Brenda have access to all of his digital information, she also had access to his apartment. And to her, the reason she couldn't have Ricky was because of Kendra. She believed if Kendra was out of the situation, she would get Ricky back. So as Brenda is stalking his phone, reading his text messages, Facebook messages, anything he had on there, he found out that Ricky was in love with Kendra, and the two of them were planning on getting married and spending the rest of their life together. And Brenda's jealousy just exploded at the thought of her not getting Ricky back. So she did the most unhinged thing possible. So obviously, once police are learning all this information through their investigation and the intense stalking that she was doing, they wanted to talk to Brenda, but Brenda was nowhere to be found. Detectives realized that they were going to need the FBI's help in finding Brenda. So they contacted the FBI, and they eventually put Brenda on the 10 most wanted fugitive lists. And this made her, at the time, only the 9th woman to ever be on the 10 most wanted list. There was a $100,000 reward offered for information about her location, and it was also specified that no one was to approach her, that she was dangerous, and to contact police if anyone saw her or knew her whereabouts. Brenda's family, on the other hand, they said that the police had it all wrong. They said that Brenda was a loving, wonderful woman, that she would never cause harm to anyone, and that it was just impossible that Brenda had anything to do with the murder of Kendra. But they obviously didn't know her that well. And not even Ricky believed that Brenda could have been involved. He told police that since their breakup, him and Brenda had remained friends. And I found this part a little bit strange, but on the night that Kendra was murdered, Ricky texted Brenda to tell her what had happened. And it was exactly falling into place what Brenda's plan was, because she immediately offered to come over in the morning and bring him groceries, be there to comfort him, do anything that she could to help him through this really horrific experience. And as the police kept talking to Ricky, basically trying to convince him that Brenda was the person responsible for this, he still didn't believe it, because she had always been a very loving person, and he could never imagine her committing a crime or anything even horrific as a murder. Like, he just was baffled at the idea that Brenda could have been the person responsible for this. So let's talk a little bit about Brenda. In 1982, Brenda's father, Louis, a factory worker in central Mexico, decided he and his family deserved a better life. After visiting Texas and other states, he brought his wife and 5 children to Dallas, which he called the city of opportunity. This ain't Texas, ain't no hold'em. Is anyone else just Beyonce is the only person that can make you listen to country music? The family moved into a modest home in southeast Dallas, and Louis got a job in construction. Maria worked at the U.S. Post Office and cleaned houses, who was Brenda's mother. Brenda was the second of 5 children and the only girl. When her brother was interviewed about her, he said that from a very young age, Brenda was determined to make something of herself. She worked very hard at school. She got along very well with her teachers. She was very hardworking and really wanted to achieve a lot in life. When Brenda graduated from high school, she had really wanted to go to medical school, but it wasn't really something that she could afford to do. So she stayed living with her parents. She got a job as a dental assistant and took a second job working at a day spa where she would whiten people's teeth. Brenda began casually dating, but she kind of had an interesting approach to dating. If she was to go on a date with a man, she would either bring one of her brothers or she would bring a friend with her. Brenda did eventually move out of her parents' house, and she rented a room in a home of a childhood friend of hers. She then decided that she wanted to join a dating app. She really wanted to find the love of her life, and this is where her and Ricky first connected. When the two of them met on the dating app, Ricky was new to dating. He was recently divorced, and he was kind of just tipping his toe into the dating pool to see what was out there. When Ricky and Brenda met, they had chemistry immediately. Ricky really admired Brenda. She had come from very humble beginnings, and she was a very hard worker, and she was someone who really did want to work really hard to achieve a lot in her life, and he really admired her ambition. Then in November 2012, 3 months after they had met, Brenda ended up moving into Ricky's apartment. Brenda then started bringing Ricky around to her parents' home, and he made a lot of effort with her parents. They both spoke Spanish, and their English was very limited, and Ricky would try really hard to speak as much Spanish as he could so that he was able to communicate with her parents. And over the next several months, their relationship just became better and better. 2 months later in June, Brenda learned that she was pregnant. Brenda and Ricky sat down and discussed the fact that she was pregnant, and the two of them came to an agreement that this was not the time that they wanted to have a child. So Brenda ended up getting an abortion. Brenda didn't tell anyone about the abortion, but later detectives would find in her notes app on her phone how distressed she was about getting this abortion. It clearly was something that she did not want to do, but it seemed as though she was doing it to please Ricky. But she also mentioned in there, one day her and Ricky would end up having children together, and it would make all of this worthwhile. And Brenda, she wanted to keep tabs on Ricky. And that's how she had all this information. She had basically set up like a spying operation on his phone. She had his email and password. She had his iCloud password, and obviously the key to his apartment. One thing Ricky had decided was he wanted to take salsa lessons. So he signed up for salsa lessons, and surprisingly, the first day that he goes to the class for the salsa lessons, guess who's there? Brenda. Now, Ricky is thinking it is just by chance that him and Brenda ended up at the same dance class. It was not. Brenda had planned this. She's on his phone. She knows exactly what he's doing constantly, and she goes to the class specifically to see Ricky. And what ends up happening is exactly what Brenda wants. The two of them have a lot of chemistry while they're dancing, and they decide that maybe they should give their relationship another try. So the two of them began dating again. This time, Ricky did not ask Brenda to move in with him, but the two of them, they were dating, things were going well, and in Brenda's mind, it looked as though this was going to lead towards marriage again, which is obviously was her ultimate goal. But the same doubts that Ricky had always had when it came to Brenda came back to him. And in February 2015, Ricky broke up with Brenda again. Ricky claimed that the two had remained platonic friends, and he kept running into Brenda. One time he was at Panero, and all of a sudden she shows up. The salsa class, she had just showed up. Constantly he was going places and Brenda would be there, and he just thought all of this was by coincidence. None of it was by coincidence. She's stalking his phone and she's going exactly where she knows he's going to be. And it's not entirely uncommon that if two people break up in a relationship, especially if you're the person who gets broken up with and you're not happy about the breakup, you may, I've had friends who have, I wouldn't say stalked their exes, but they definitely will go online and kind of will keep tabs on what they're doing, who they're seeing. But with Brenda, it wasn't just a curiosity. It wasn't a, let me just see, how they're doing, or are they dating someone new, or anything like that. She was stage 5 clinger, like beyond. She was stalking his every movement. She had his location. So at any point, she knew exactly where he was. And she was spinning out of control with jealousy. Her jealousy was fueling this absolute insanity that was going on in her. And in her mind, the only thing she wanted was Ricky. And then in May 2015, along came Kendra. Kendra was just an absolutely amazing woman. She had been born and raised in a small town in Illinois. Her mother, Bonnie, owned a quilt shop. Kendra was the captain of her high school cheerleading squad and the girls' volleyball team. She was just really a sweet, kind person. She went on mission trips abroad to help build churches, and she led Bible studies for low-income children. Kendra had attended the University of Kentucky College of Dentistry. She had spent her spring breaks working for Habitat for Humanity, and one Christmas she had traveled to Ecuador to perform free dental work for underprivileged children. And she was just a really generous, loving, amazing woman. All of her friends and all of her families had nothing but absolutely glowing things to say about her. She had a really pure heart, and it shined through, and everyone who got the opportunity to know her got to see that. Kendra had married her college boyfriend, but it didn't really last long. In 2010, she was hoping for a fresh start, so she moved to Dallas, and this is when she moved into the Gables Park 17 apartment complex, and she was working at Smile Zone. So on Tinder, when Kendra and Ricky saw each other on May 24th, they both swiped right. They both felt like they had very similar interests. They both wanted to work towards very similar goals, and they really both embodied the characteristics that the two of them wanted in a partner. Ricky's impression was that him and Brenda had remained platonic friends, and she had presented herself to him as though she was handling the breakup well and she was moving on with her life. But that was not the case at all. And Brenda's online stalking just became absolutely unhinged. Kendra had a public Facebook page, so everything she posted, you didn't need to be her friend to be able to read it. And she posted constantly about her love for Ricky, which is normal. Her and Ricky are in love. They're planning to spend the rest of their lives together. They're going on amazing vacations. These are all things, a lot of people would share online. But then you have Brenda sitting at home in the dark, freaking out, wanting to destroy this woman for having the life basically that Brenda couldn't have. Her jealousy of Kendra was absolutely astronomical. One night, Brenda had gone on a date with a man named Roberto Menendez. And he was a car salesman who they seemed to have a romantic interest in each other. And she had spent her dinner with him talking about her ex-boyfriend and his new girlfriend. And after they had gone out for dinner, Brenda had asked them to drive to the Gable Park 17 apartment complex where Kendra lived. And they just kind of stayed outside watching. And this Roberto, he didn't understand what they were doing there, why they were there, what was going on. But what they were doing was they were stalking Kendra. It's just Roberto, he didn't realize that's what he was doing. Brenda then at some point went out for drinks with a cousin of hers and was asking him if he would hurt someone for her. And nobody was really taking Brenda too seriously. They just thought, she's really jealous. She's really angry. She had been drinking. They weren't really taking it seriously. Brenda approached a 23-year-old single mother who was a friend of Jennifer's, and her name was Crystal Quartz. She had come by the apartment a couple of times, and she was a single mother of a 6-year-old boy. Crystal was living with her son at her grandmother's house, and she was low income. She was only making $11 an hour working as a receptionist, and she was trying as hard as she could to try to better her life for her and her son. Crystal really looked up to Brenda. She really thought Brenda had her life together. She drove a nice car. She had nice clothing. She had her hair and makeup always done nice. So Crystal really admired Brenda. Brenda then started taking Crystal out to really nice restaurants. She would take her out for drinks, and Obviously, the topic of discussion was always Ricky. Brenda then offered Crystal $500 to commit the murder, and Crystal said yes. I'm speechless. $500, you're agreeing to kill someone? It's just baffling that a woman who she's only known for a couple of weeks offers her $500 to take someone's life, and she agrees to it. And when she was questioned by police, she said that she was broke and she had a son to support. So the two women decide that they need someone else to help them with this plan. So they just start driving around Crystal's neighborhood, randomly going up to strange men, asking them if he will help them commit this murder for hire plan. So then they find this man who agrees to it. His name is Christopher Love. He's 31. He's a small-time substance dealer, and he has an extensive criminal record. He had convictions for aggravated assault, aggravated robbery, and burglary of a residence. And he had also told a friend that he had wanted to start a prostitution ring. He just needed some money to get that going. So his plan was to participate in this murder to get a bit of money so he can start a prostitution ring. So we're dealing with some real winners. Brenda and Crystal ask Christopher if he has a weapon that he can use, and he's got a gun that he can use. All while these three fools are coming up with this absolutely unhinged plan. In August, Ricky and Kendra were visiting San Francisco, and it was their third trip to California that summer, and they had posted photos of themselves on Facebook riding a tandem bicycle and going go-karting and just doing some really fun activities. They made plans to take more trips in September to Cancun for Labor Day weekend, and they also made a plan to travel to Pleasant Plains so that Ricky could finally meet Kendra's family. Brenda and Ricky had kept in touch, and Ricky had let Brenda know that on August 31st, he was going to be taking her off his cell phone plan. So he had a cell phone plan and her phone was still under his plan. And he also asked her if she knew of anyone who'd be interested in purchasing any of his furniture because he was planning to move to Sacramento. And this absolutely devastated Brenda. She realized that he was moving 1,700 miles away, no doubt with Kendra, and this was it. This was going to be the end of any chance that she thought in her mind. She never did, but she really thought there was some possibility that they could get back together. Him moving that far away with Kendra to start their life in Sacramento because he'd been accepted at a medical practice, she knew it was now or never. And to her, it was now. There was no possibility that she was going to let the two of them leave and live a happy, peaceful life that they deserved. Brenda decided that the killing was going to take place on September 2nd, which was the day before the couple were planning on taking a trip to Cancun. Brenda and Crystal decided that they were going to borrow a friend's BMW to commit the crime. But that morning, there was a problem with the BMW's accelerator, and Brenda and Crystal took the car to an auto repair shop owned by Brenda's friend, and his name was Jose Ortiz. And he agreed to let them borrow his black Jeep Cherokee while he worked on the BMW. Now, he has no idea that they're about to use his vehicle to commit a murder. He just thinks that they need work done on their car. It's his cousin. Here, borrow my car while I'm working on yours. No idea that there's a crime about to be committed with his vehicle. Crystal then drove Brenda to a public library where Brenda had arranged to meet with a classmate. So this was going to be her alibi. Brenda was going to be at the library with classmates studying so that she would have this alibi for when Kendra was murdered. So Crystal drops Brenda off there, and she then picks up Christopher, and they park across the street from Smile Zone where Brenda was already at work. For most of the day, the two of them just sat in the car staring at Kendra's car. She had a white Toyota Camry. At around 2:30, Crystal suddenly put the Jeep into gear, telling Christopher that she needed to pick up her son from school. So Crystal drops Christopher back off at his apartment. She goes, picks up her son from school. She buys him some Sonic, drops him off at his grandmother's house, and then returns to Christopher's apartment to pick him back up. So Crystal and Christopher drive back to Smile Zone where Kendra works, and she's actually leaving work as they arrive. She had plans to pick up a waterproof camera to use for her trip to Cancun that she was leaving for the next day. So they end up losing track of her. So then Crystal and Christopher decide they're just going to drive back to her parking garage at Gable 17 where she lives. They were only there for a couple of minutes before Kendra arrived. Christopher, who had been hiding in the back seat of the vehicle, as soon as they are close enough to Kendra, he gets out of the vehicle, pulls out the weapon, and ends Kendra's life. He then grabbed her Coach purse and got back in the vehicle, and the two of them left. Kendra was now lying face up, deceased in her parking garage. At the time of the murder, Brenda was at a restaurant with a classmate named Jose. She returned home around 9 p.m. and she contacted Crystal to confirm that the task had been completed. So then they go back to the mechanic to give the Jeep back to the mechanic and get the BMW back. And Brenda was overjoyed when she received a text later that night from Ricky informing her that Kendra had been murdered. Eric Barnes, who is a veteran Dallas police homicide detective, he was in charge of the murder investigation, and he only had one lead. He had a very grainy surveillance video of a woman driving a black Jeep Cherokee out of the parking garage. Now, Jose, who owns the Jeep and had no idea that it was going to be used for a crime, calls up Brenda because he recognizes his Jeep immediately when it's plastered all over the news. So he contacts Brenda like, what in the hell is going on? You used my Jeep? And Brenda says to Jose, oh, we'll just paint, I'll pay to have your Jeep painted a different color so they won't recognize it. And Jose is like, hell no. He talks to some of his family about what had gone on and that his car had been used in a murder. So he then contacts the police to inform them of exactly what had occurred that day. So Detective Barnes obviously brings Brenda in for questioning, and Brenda tries to play it off like, oh yeah, me and Ricky dated and we broke up a while ago, and I think we're better not together. Like, she acted like she was totally fine with the two of them not being together, trying to obviously not make herself look suspicious. But yeah, it's a bit late, Brenda. A bit late, Brenda. So then also during the interrogation, Crystal gets brought in, and Crystal tells the police when she's being questioned that she had spent the entire day with her son, and that was her alibi. Then Crystal says that a man named Lamar, whom she didn't know, had forced her at gunpoint to drive him into the parking garage to rob Kendra. Finally, she admitted that Brenda had paid her and Lamar to do the robbery, but she said she had no idea that Lamar was going to shoot anyone. After the shooting, Crystal continued, Lamar got back in the Jeep and ordered her to drive away. She did not protest. She said that she did what he said because he had a gun. Just to be clear, there's no Lamar. He doesn't exist. This is just what Crystal's making up. And Detective Barnes, he was very good at interrogation because he, at this point in the investigation and everyone he's talked to and all the information that he has, he knows this whole thing is centered around Brenda. So he goes and he's speaking again in interrogation to Brenda, and he's trying, often what police will do is they'll sympathize trying to get a confession. And he basically was saying to Brenda, it must be so hard for you knowing that you weren't good enough for Ricky. It must have been so difficult to realize that you could never measure up to Kendra, and there was no way that Ricky was ever going to choose you over someone who was that amazing. And he just kept emphasizing the fact that Brenda was not good enough for Ricky, which, to be honest, she wasn't. He then would go on saying that, you're not a bad person, Brenda. And he was saying things to Brenda like, Brenda, you're not a bad person. There's only so much a person can take. At a certain point, everyone will break. Basically trying to make it seem like it was reasonable that this psychopath just killed this poor innocent woman. But obviously, to get a confession, interrogators have to say a lot of BS. And for a time, it did seem to Detective Barnes that she was going to crack. But Brenda didn't, and he realized that he was going to have to let her go. Meanwhile, he was able to arrest Crystal on capital murder charges. A few days later, through phone records, that's how police were led to Christopher Love to find out that he was the man who had shot Kendra. Then at this point, once they have the two of them arrested, they want to arrest Brenda. The problem is Brenda has hit the road and she's gone to Mexico and nobody knows where she is. For 6 months, Brenda lived quietly with relatives in a small town in Mexico. But eventually, Mexican authorities were able to assist the FBI in apprehending Brenda, and she went with them peacefully. Brenda was a U.S. citizen, but because she was born in Mexico, she was still also a Mexican citizen. So according to Mexican law, and this is quite common in a lot of countries, I live in Canada. In Canada, if somebody commits a murder in America, Canada will not extradite someone who's going to be given the death penalty. And it was the same in this case, that the Mexican authorities would not release her to America unless they promised to take the death penalty off the table. Kevin Brooks, he was the lead prosecutor for the case in the Dallas District Attorney's Office, and he knew he didn't have the strongest case against Brenda. She did, after all, have an alibi for the night of the murder. So what he decided to do was to meet with Crystal, and he offered her a 35-year sentence in return for her testimony about the roles she, Brenda, and Christopher had played in Kendra's murder. Crystal spoke to her attorney, and he said that if she could be granted parole after 15 years, she would agree to the deal. Christopher was tried in October 2018. Relying on Crystal's testimony, jurors only took 2 hours to find him guilty, and they voted to sentence him to death by lethal injection. During Brenda's trial, she did not look at anyone in the courtroom. She didn't look at anyone sitting behind her. She didn't look at anyone testifying. She just kept her head down until Ricky took the stand. And maybe Brenda realized that this was her last chance to see him and the last chance for him to see her. Brenda was staring at Ricky, trying, hoping he would look at her, but Ricky completely ignored her. The only time he did look at her was when he had to look at her for a few seconds to identify her. It took jurors only 20 minutes to return a guilty verdict for capital murder, and the judge sentenced Brenda to life in prison without parole. And that is the end of today's story. I do apologize again. I know probably with my voice, this is probably not going to have the best audio, and it may not be my best video. I have pneumonia, so I'm really tried as hard as I could to make a good video for you guys, but don't hold this one against me. It may not be my best, but I appreciate all of you, and I really appreciate the suggestion from you, Sunny Bear. Thank you so much. I hope you all do something today that makes your soul happy, and I will see you in the next one.